Hey everybody, this is my thoughts on Cortex Command. This is a pretty interesting game. It's a combination of side-scrolling action and strategy by Data Realms. You may be wondering, why is this an MTO and not a review? Because this game's been out for a couple of years now. Well, the simple reason is it's technically still not finished. The game's been in development for over a decade, apparently, and it's still not finished. I don't know if it ever will finish, but it's certainly in a very playable state right now, so here's what I think about it in general. It certainly has issues from not being finished, I will make that very clear, but let's start with the presentation, because this is certainly done in a sort of retro style. It's 2D, it's pixel art, and for the most part they've done a pretty good job with it. The art's very unique among pixel art. There's a lot of cool effects with the units themselves. When they get blasted to bits, they'll actually still be able to function with say, just the upper part of their torso and things like that. It's kind of goofy, actually. So there's a lot of destructibility. You can destroy the environments, and you'll see big chunks of the environment will be blasted out, things like that. And of course, that all is done in that pixel art style, and for the most part, it works pretty well. So the main issue with it is the animations. They're very sluggish. They aren't that detailed. They're just there, and they suffice, I suppose, but that's really the only major issue I have with the visuals. For the most part, they look fine. It's just those animations are just so sluggish, and the movement in general is just really sluggish too, so that doesn't really help it out at all. The sound design is pretty well done for the most part. You've got some pretty solid sound effects that work very well. The music is very catchy. It fits very well. It's got a really cool main theme going on with the intro sequence. And I really like what they've done with the sound design more so than the visuals, because the visuals, we've seen pixel art just a dime a dozen these days. This was one of the earlier ones to be doing that retro pixel art style, so I mean, you can let that slide more. But the sound design is something that not a lot of games really get right, and they've done a pretty good job for the most part on this one, so they're certainly to be commended for that. But what about the story and the gameplay? Well, the story is pretty much non-existent. Basically, it gives you the backstory and then lets you loose into a pretty much free-form campaign, where the idea is that in the far future, humans have managed to separate their minds, as in their brains, from their squishy mortal bodies and put them into artificial means of survival. And this allows them to travel into the stars. Well, this comes with the need for expansion, for more resources, and thus there's basically just a land grab for resources going on this planet that you're engaging in all-out warfare on. That's pretty much all you need to know about the storyline. There's really not much in the way of it in the game. In fact, the campaign doesn't really do anything with regards to the storyline. It just gives you some interconnected missions. And the real meat of the gameplay is in the gameplay itself. You will find that it's really more about a vehicle for the gameplay as far as the story goes. I mean, it's more of a vehicle for the gameplay than anything else. It just gives you setup and it's like, okay, have fun. So what about the gameplay itself? Well, like I said, it's a very unique hybrid of strategy and side-scrolling action. Now, you may have seen my How to Fail video on this, and if so, you know that the tutorial for this game is pretty terrible. So you have to do a lot of it through trial and error. What you find out is that you get access to the brain, and the brain is the be-all, end-all for your faction. If you lose your brain, you lose, period. So, you need to protect your brain at all costs. How do you do that? Well, you need remote bodies. Remote bodies can be purchased using gold. How do you get gold? Well, you can mine for it with diggers, or you can start with it, depending on how much you've allotted to a given mission, if it's the campaign, or if you just decide to do a scenario, then however much you get in that scenario and things like that. So that's pretty much all you need to know as far as its basics go. When you get to the actual meat of the gameplay, you'll find that it's spent controlling these remote bodies in their very clumsy, awkward fashion in a very weird side-scrolling shoot-'em-up kind of thing. Now, each of these remote bodies can have a variety of weapons, just how much you can afford to give them, basically. And there's a variety of different body types available. Some of them are heavy, some of them are light, some of them are weaker than others, some of them are stronger than others, just based on a variety of stats. And you'll also find that in this video, you're probably seeing stuff for the Imperium of Man. That's because I put a mod in here for that. The game is very moddable, and that's pretty much what's been keeping it alive. But you find that mods can often break the game. In fact, the Imperium of Man really breaks the game. So the four factions you start with are, well, yeah, four factions. I don't really know the difference between them so much. I basically just fiddled around with them and found something that I like, and that's the brown coats. I just like what they've got, and that's pretty much it. So I kind of stuck with them for whenever I was playing. Really, it's up to you to find out what you prefer and just stick with it. Each of the factions has their own separate equipment, has different effects, like the dummies are kind of useless. I wouldn't bother with them, but they're amusing to stomp on for a while. The other three factions, I think they're Coalition, Imperatus, and the Browncoats, each have their own variety of equipment and bodies available, and each of them have their own ups and downs. But the real problem I have with the game is just that it's so awkward. It feels like you're moving through molasses whenever you're actually using one of the bodies. They can move side to side, they can look in pretty much any direction, they can crouch and crawl and things like that, but they're so slow. And even when you got the jetpack on full blast, they're still slow. So it's just one of those problems where it feels like you're just playing a waiting game almost. It's so sluggish with the movement that it actually becomes rather boring to play, despite when you're actually in a heated battle or something like that. And a lot of it comes down to whether you get lucky or not. Maybe you got lucky and got a decent position, or maybe you're lucky and your guy didn't take a massive amount of damage from the horde of enemies that he just came upon. Or maybe you just got lucky and the enemy got bunched up because the AI in this game really isn't all that great. But it's just one of those games where it's a really cool idea. The idea of this side-scrolling action mixed with strategy where you can drop in a variety of units and equipment, customize quite a lot to your liking, actually. Where you get this resource gathering side along with the actual combat, where it's a pretty simple game for the most part and focuses primarily on the action side of things. That could be a really awesome game if they iron out the problems in it. And I don't think they're going to. That's the problem I have. It just feels like with the updates that I've seen this game go through, it's not really getting that much better. It's getting better slowly, but it's really not getting that much better. Like the recent big update was that they put it on the Steam Workshop and they added in some achievements and things like that. But that was pretty much it, and it put in a bunch of bug fixes and maybe some minor tweaks, but they didn't really do anything that wowed me. And I mean, it may get better later on. We'll see. I mean, it's certainly still being developed. There's certainly plenty of room for improvement, and I really do hope it improves because, again, it's a really cool concept. But it's just not that fun to play. It's boring. And maybe it's better with friends. I haven't been able to play it with friends because it's only local multiplayer, and that just boggles my mind, by the way, why anything on PC only would be local multiplayer only. Maybe they'll put in some online multiplayer later on, but the lack of online multiplayer makes this thing kind of a problem. You can really tell it's made for multiplayer, and it only being local multiplayer really is a detriment to the game. Because the AI is just really pathetic. It doesn't really do anything that would make it actually come close to winning. And what turning up the difficulty does is basically just makes the enemies have faster reaction times and be more accurate. That's about it. They're not really that much smarter. And so I find that Cortex Command has a lot of potential. And if they improve on the things that are not quite there yet, then I feel like it could go somewhere and become a really, really great game. But right now, as I'm making this video, which is currently May the 4th of 2014, it's just not all there. And with the time it's been in development, I really can't recommend it. It seems like we've had this thing in development for so long, but not that much has come out of it. I'm not really sure what's going on over at Data Realms. I mean, I hope they're all hard at work, and I hope they improve things, and I'm sure they will eventually. But it just seems like progress is really slow, and I can't in good faith recommend this thing until it gets some really solid improvements out there. Because again, it may well be a fantastic concept that expands much later on into something that's far better than it is right now. But right now, it's just not that great. It's okay, at best, but it seems like there's just so much wasted potential in this thing. It could really be great, but right now it's just really boring because they haven't quite capitalized on what could be great yet. But if you want something that's a side-scrolling action strategy game where it's a pretty simple thing to pick up as long as you're patient with it and really do a lot of trial and error, and don't really take the advice of the tutorial all that much because it really isn't all that helpful, well, you might be able to get something out of it, and there's certainly plenty of people who can get things out of it. It's certainly a very moddable game, so you might find some mods that you like for it, like the Imperium of Man mod, for instance, I don't know. And you might be able to get quite a bit of enjoyment out of it, but I personally can't really enjoy it all that much, at least not right now. Maybe if they improve the things later on, maybe if they improve performance, because that's another thing that's been a big problem for me. Performance, it's crashed a lot, particularly when I've been trying to play the campaign, it's crashed a lot. But things like that, if they improve all that sort of thing, if they improve the unit handling where they don't feel like they're moving through molasses all the time, then I can see this game getting really, really fun. And if they add in some freaking online play, then it would be just great, because that's what this thing is clearly meant for. But without online multiplayer, it just flounders. You can't really do a PC local multiplayer experience and get away with it anymore. Way back when people didn't have the internet and such like that, you could get away with it because, I mean, you'd invite your friend over or something like that. Nowadays, we pretty much need online play. So, I hope they actually do put in some online play, because that would remedy the AI problem especially, and I can see it being a really, really fun multiplayer experience. But as single player, which is what I've managed to play it as, it's just not there yet. So ultimately, tons of potential, not quite there yet, but hopefully it will get there. I do have the hope that it will get better, because it has gotten better. That last update that I mentioned, it did improve quite a few things, particularly with the bug fixes. It hasn't crashed anywhere near as much as it did before, so it's certainly improving, but progress is really slow. I just hope that they get there in time, because otherwise, it's just kind of sitting here in the background and not really getting much attention. Anyway, thanks for watching.